because I had skated academically most of the way through high school and college, and not really having to try very hard, and always thinking that if you tried very hard, you weren't smart, right? So, which is again this like older attitude of like thinking that you're either born smart or you're not. It was very much the nature versus nurture type thing, which now there's so much more better information and data on. And when I thank God the Navy really kicked that out of me, because I got to flight school. When I got to flight school, you can't just study for the test. Like, they are trying to fail you out all the time, and they're trying to teach you things so that when you are falling out of the sky upside down and your aircraft is on fire, you can remember things and get it right.
All right, welcome to the Path Distilled. I'm your host, Kevin Harris. My co-host is Lauren Tashman.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today.
And today we're excited. We have Abe Kamarck. He's the founder and CEO of True Made Foods. Thank you for joining us today, Abe.
Thanks, Kevin. Thanks, Lauren. Thanks for having me. This is a real honor. I really appreciate it.
For sure. And as we were chatting before the episode started, I want everybody to know that I'm actually a consumer. I love your stuff, your products.
That's great. That is wonderful. I love hearing that more than anything else. So that's the best thing.
For sure. And if I encourage everyone to try it if they haven't already. I'll leave it up to you to tell us some about your products later on. But could you kind of tell us kind of where your story begins and kind of how you got involved in the business?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I was, I guess my story begins all kinds of places, but, varied background, mostly grew up on the East Coast, but went to Vanderbilt on a ROTC scholarship, Navy ROTC, and graduated in '99, and I was commissioned in the Navy, and went to flight school, and I became a Navy helicopter pilot. And so I was spent 8 years in the Navy, did multiple deployments. For my time stationed in Florida, I was probably at sea more than I was at home, which was unfortunate because I loved living in Florida, because that was really kind of sparked my passion for grilling and barbecue. Like, whenever we were home, like, that's all I did was cook outside.
It's always beautiful there.
Yeah, I actually ended up cooking fish so much too, because the fish was amazing, like especially in Mayport. And it also like really kind of got me. I mean, I grew up cooking. I grew up with two working parents, and my dad was almost never around for various reasons, not always good. So me and my siblings, we all each ended up becoming very self-reliant, because our parents were very hands-off parents that way. And so we all ended up learning how to cook on our own. And we also came from a very culinary focused family. My mom was Sicilian, and like cooking was just something we did. My parents didn't own a microwave until I went off to college. Like, I don't think they bought one till then. Wow. Pasta sauce in a jar was anathema in our household. There was just certain things you didn't do.
Sure.
And
your mom and my mom would get along. Same.
And that developed like certain building blocks of food for me, which kind of led to True Made Foods, kind of developed more when I was in the military and on my own and cooking and starting to discover new cuisines, and incorporating different types of cooking techniques. I can say my ethnic background and my culinary background is really kind of like Southern Italian and Southern Virginian, because my dad's only a small part Southern Virginian. His grandmother, my great grandmother, but she had an outsized influence on the cooking in the family. She was most famous for being a really famous cook, and was known for hosting parties in the DC area with her with her culinary ability, even though she only had a third grade education. And so, I kind of grew up with this background, but we also grew up with this background of like using really fresh and natural ingredients and using all vegetables and fruits. My great grandmother's Virginian recipes, like she used lots of butter and pork fat, but no sugar. Like the only sugar in any of our family cookbook recipes are in desserts. And now you look at Southern cooking and it's almost all sugar in everything. Like every recipe has sugar in it. It's ridiculous. And same with Italian food. Like my mom always said, basically what she taught me was that early on, it was only lazy Italians use sugar, right? It was a shortcut. It's something people developed after they came to the U.S. post World War II kind of thing. When food got industrialized, as a way to make the food taste better faster without doing the real work in cooking. And the way we learned to cook was like use apples to make your pork taste better, if you want to make it sweet, and you use carrots to make the pasta sauce sweet, right, to cut the acid in tomato. And so that's kind of like the basis. And then, that developed for me more when I was in the Navy and deploying. And, I got to go to South America for counter narcotics operations, and then the Gulf for the Iraq War. And, got to travel and eat at all these different places, and then stopped in Europe a bunch of times. And then, so one of the things I wanted to do, and one of the reasons I joined the Navy is because I wanted to I just wanted to get out and do things. Like I just never wanted to have a desk job. My dad was a lawyer, and we never saw him around. He was never home. He was never home, and he was never happy. Like either, like he just was not an involved father and not happy person like ever when we were kids, and that just turned me off to doing anything at all that looked like that. And so I was completely set on joining the Navy and getting the hell out, kind of thing, doing anything that was not that didn't look like a lawyer job, right? And that probably also led me to entrepreneurship too, right? Kind of set the base. I didn't know it at the time. Because at the time I would have thought entrepreneurship was way too much like a business job, and I would have wanted that, right? Which it is in some ways. So became an aviator, and I joined the Navy because I wanted to deploy and get out. And I joined, kind of just pre, because I got commissioned in '99, so I pre 9/11. When at the time, only only Navy and the Marine Corps went out and did things, in the 90s, like, because the Navy and Marine Corps basically deploy all the time, constantly. Or Navy especially are always at sea. And the Army, up until that point, really was still kind of like sitting around waiting for Soviets to invade. Wasn't really ready for this. And so the idea then was like, if you really want to get out and see something or do something, you got to join the Navy. So that's what I did. And then of course 9/11 happened and the Iraq War happened. The Army did everything. It's all a different swap. But at least I did deploy a lot. We were in the Gulf for the beginning of the Iraq War. And I got to, see a lot of different things and go to a lot of different countries. And one of the great parts is for my shore duty when I was after you do a sea tour where you deploy all the time, you do a shore duty in the Navy where it's kind of like they want you to experience like kind of more of an officer development side. So usually you go to like a major command or the Pentagon or something in DC. And I went to US European Command because I really wanted to, again, stay overseas and I wanted to keep going overseas. And so I lived in England for 4 years and got to travel a lot for work and for fun. We had just gotten married when we moved over there. My wife was Navy too, and she had just gotten out, and so she was able to come over, and she did her grad degree full time while we were there. And I was lucky. This is a really big turning point in my life here because we got to experience all the different culinary techniques and stuff like that, different cooking, traveling around. And we got to, at the same time too, I was able to get my graduate degree. I went to London Business School part-time, did the executive program there. So that was really lucky that I was able to do that. And so especially to go to such a great program like LBS. So we lived in Cambridge, had a great time there, and traveled back and forth to London. And while we were there too, and this brings up the picture, is we had our first kid. I had my oldest son, Mateo, and he's the first of four. But this was like kind of a major change point for us. One, because it kind of like I made the decision to get out of the Navy at the time, you know, to try to pursue business. And it was just kind of really flux life point. I mean, up until that point, like, so my first son was born when I was 30. So like my entire 20s had been in the military. I had known nothing else. You get the same paycheck every 2 weeks. And then, you know, I got this business degree, and it kind of opened my eyes up to all these different other possibilities of things that I could do. And I looked at as an officer in the Navy, especially, if you want to advance, your career path is pretty set in stone. Like there's like hurdles you just have to jump. You got to go do this. You got to do this next. You got to do this next. You got to get this qualification. And at the time, it just was not attractive to me to do that. Like I really just wanted to get out and just do different things and experience different things. That's always been a big piece of me when I was younger, and we took that up through my 30s. And so we decided that I should get out. We decided, you know, we just paid for these expensive grad degrees. We should put them to use. And at the time, this was like we did our grad. We were stationed there between 2004 and 2008, or the end of 2007, really. And so at the time, like 2004, 2005, 6, like I was seeing, especially at business school, I was seeing all these people getting out, making all this money. And London was just like the epicenter of this amazing economic boom. And so it looked like, you know, the sky was the limit. I just got this great MBA, you know, and they build you up to make you think that you're the best in the world, and people are going to be throwing money at you, and they're going to want you so badly. And number one, that's not really the case. Like even at the top business schools, you just got to realize, like, you know, London Business School graduates like 400 people a year. And that's a lot of people, you know, at the end of the day, competing for a few top end jobs. And, you know, Harvard graduates 1,000 people, Wharton graduates 1,000 people every year. You know, it's not that, I mean, that's pretty elite from when you look at the world population, but it's really, you know, it's still a lot of people competing for the same consultancy jobs and things like that, which really aren't great jobs at the end of the day either. But, you know, it's something that everybody wants to do when you're coming out of business school. And on top of that, the financial crisis started to happen right as I got out. Literally the last day of my last day in the Navy was December 31st, 2007. So it was already starting to throttle up. 2008, it really got bad. And I did not have the tools to deal with this. Plus, we had our first son. He was born in 2007 in February, and then we got pregnant at the beginning of 2008 with our second son. So, and we had school loans from the grad degrees. And we didn't have a lot of savings because we had been paying part of our grad degrees out of our savings. And, you know, we've been in the military. So it's not like we were saving a ton, you know, weren't getting paid that much. And so, you know, it was just like this perfect storm of, you know, a perfect crap storm, I guess, like everything hitting us all at once. And we were living in London where it was like 2 to 1 to the dollar, and our savings were in dollars, and the pound was like 2 to 1 at the time at the beginning of 2008. So it was just like awful, like everything was the worst. So we were trying to make a buy off of some savings, we managed to get some consulting work. My granddad his health was failing, and he started to give some of his money away. So he gave us like $9,000, you know, and that helped significantly at the time. You know, not a huge amount, but like it was a huge amount for that. Like paid the rent for 2 months. And we were, so, you know, if it wasn't for all of that, like, you know, but it was incredibly difficult. And, you know, you just go from this point of optimism to this complete point of pessimism of like really worrying. And it was really difficult for us too, because we initially, when we moved to London from Cambridge, where we had been living when I was stationed in the military, like we, you know, kind of went along with our regular spending patterns. You know, we joined an expensive gym. We, you know, were buying food. We were eating out, and like thinking, oh yeah, maybe like we'll have 1 month of like no salary or something like that, and then not realizing that this could get really bad. And I think, you know, part of that mentality, there's a key point, I think, that, and I'm not really a millennial, I'm too young, but this shares, I'm too old, sorry, too old, I'm 1977. But I'm close. I'm in that gap, like kind of between Gen X and millennials. And I think what I shared with the millennial generation was this like baby boomer optimism, because my parents were baby boomers. They just had me young. And this baby boomer optimism that they build up for us, right? And especially if you were white, right? If you're white and like came from, you know, upper middle class background, you know, because they just had it amazing ride, right? And they just built it up. And I remember growing up, like my parents talking about like my grandparents who were mostly immigrants and went through the Depression and World War II, and like how they would kind of joke about their attitudes, because like my grandparents' attitude was like, you know, find a career, get a solid job. Government jobs are great. You want something, you know, that holds on and gives you benefits and a pension, and you know, you never know what could happen. Like this is very like scared and like Depression era type attitude, and an immigrant attitude, you know, very much an immigrant attitude. And my parents would like poo-poo that, and they were like, oh, liberal arts degree, doesn't matter what you major in, you know, get like, and looking back, I mean, it was ridiculous. Like they were like, oh, you don't need to take, thank God for the Navy. The Navy forced me to take math and physics and stuff like that in college. Otherwise, I literally tested out of it. I wouldn't have taken a single math course all through college if it wasn't for the Navy. And, you know, Navy made me take physics with calculus, and the Navy made me take computer programming, which I probably should have done a lot more of. But like, you know, these are the things, you know, that, you know, baby boomer parents are like, oh, you know, easy liberal arts degree, you'll be set for life, right? It doesn't really matter. And this is what kind of came crashing down on me in like 2008, is like this reality that, you know, no, it's like you got to hustle, like you really got to turn it around. And actually then for that point, like, thank God I had the Navy, because the Navy had like, even though I'd had like a little bit of this attitude that, you know, okay, things were always going to be all right, probably always going to have a good job, things like that. As the world came crashing down around me, and realizing that like, no, I'm going to have to make it on my own and figure this out and everything. And thank God the Navy had instilled this like insane amount of grit and push through for me, that had knocked out whatever other bad stuff. I think having baby boomer parents, like, you know, raising you, my parents are great people, but like, you know, it's, so I want to paint a terrible picture of them, but like, you know, I had a very good childhood. I'm not going to complain about it too much, but these are, you know, just obviously not everything, you know, one way or the other is gray area, and this is some of the gray area. And I think one of the generational things that we experienced, and one of the things people complain about millennials, is this like boomer attitude that, you know, everything's going to be great and you don't really need to worry, everything should be fine. And I had that actually, like, because I had skated academically most of the way through high school and college, and you know, not really having to try very hard, and always thinking that if you tried very hard, you weren't smart, right? It was, you know, so, which is again this like older attitude of like thinking that you're either born smart or you're not. It was very much, you know, the nature versus nurture type thing, which now, you know, there's so much more better information and data on. And when I thank God the Navy really kicked that out of me, because I got to flight school. When I got to flight school, you can't just study for the test. Like, they are trying to fail you out all the time, and they're trying to teach you things so that when you are falling out of the sky upside down and your aircraft is on fire, you can remember things and get it right. So there's no more, like in college you can get by, you know, studying for the test, cramming the night before. You know, for flight school you have to really know stuff. And I like got this close at one point in flight school of failing out, and like I had to like seriously like just turn my entire attitude around of like how hard I needed to work. And you know, I had to teach myself how to study. I had to teach myself how to study a whole different way, where you learn this stuff inside and out. Like, and that kind of, I think, really saved, that training from flight school really saved my butt in the recession, because I was able to that kind of skill set is something where if you can fall back on, you can find anything and quickly become an expert in it fast and know it better than the people, you know, who are doing it. Because we learned how to tear it apart.
I'm curious, I don't want to slow your momentum, but when you're in this situation back in 2008, have you already started, was your goal to start a business at this point, or is it something that came later?
You know, I had dreams of being an entrepreneur back then too. And I think in a way, but there was always this conflict where like, and I think a lot of like late stage, and this is a lifestyle thing, there were like a lot of lifestyle, like not lifestyle entrepreneurs, but like late stage entrepreneurs have this conflict where, you know, you want to build something amazing and great. Everyone, there's, you know, there's lifestyle entrepreneurship and there's like high scalability entrepreneurship where where if you're doing the latter, if you're doing a business that can scale, you know, significantly, you need to be able to lose money for a significant amount of time. And that means either having a significant amount of investment or, you know, usually going without a salary or taking major, you know, cuts in lifestyle. And when you have kids, like all of a sudden that equation changes, right? And it's, so when you have kids and you have school loans too, like that equation really changes, and your cost of living is extremely high because you're living in these urban areas. These equations change significantly. And I think when people talk about entrepreneurship in America, quick sidetrack, like this is the biggest problem that we are seeing today. And if you actually think, despite all the hype, there's actually less entrepreneurship and less people starting more businesses now than there ever have been before. And the real numbers about it is less businesses are being started. And I think, you know, it's because it's way too hard from a cost. People don't look at it like it's much easier to start a business from like, you know, you can outsource everything, Amazon Web Services. There's, you know, you can set up a website on Squarespace or, you know, WordPress, super easy. Set up a business on Amazon. You know, all these things are really easy now. What's hard is taking that extra risk. Like healthcare is harder to come by. It's more expensive. You know, yeah. Most people are loaded down with school loans, whether grad degree or undergraduate degree, things like this. Cost of living in the major metropolitan areas is like out of control. Like, so just being able to, you know, pay your rent is extremely hard. So it's really hard to say, you know, I'm going to go 6 months without a salary, or you can't start a business like with $3,000 anymore, you know, or yeah, very difficult. And I think, you know, with the, you know, your iceberg thing is, either when you're starting a successful business these days, either it's going to take a hell of a lot of time or a lot more money and network than you anticipate. And that's the story that doesn't get told a lot behind a lot of these successful businesses is, you know, either that they were like a 20-year overnight success, or that there was like this major, they had a network or a certain access to capital that most average people don't have. We see that in the food business I work in right now. You see that a lot of the highly scaled businesses that do really well are mostly in the news. There's some connection between, you know, and I'm not trying to take away anything from these entrepreneurs, because obviously they succeeded and did a great job and they executed very well. But like the founder behind it, RX Bar, came from a food family. Like his parents ran like a distributor and a manufacturing place. Like the network was built in, you know, it's a major advantage, you know. Did extremely well. He hit the market just right. He did the marketing just right, did everything just right. But it was an incredible success story. But, you know, there was that extra bit behind it, you know, that really makes a difference. You know, cuts years off of the life cycle of the business. And so I think, you know, I did in 2008, to get back to your question, I did want to be an entrepreneur. Being at business school really did get me excited for being an entrepreneur. But it was just like this pull, like I really wanted to do it, but like there was no way, you know, there was number one, I didn't have a business idea at the time. Right. And
minor detail.
Yeah, minor detail. And that I was super passionate about, just wanted to do. And number two, you know, I had this pressure on to, you know, provide for the family and things like this. You know, what happens, I took a job in Bulgaria. I went to emerging markets. I worked at a plastics factory in Bulgaria where I took it over and tried to flip the company. That was an amazing experience. We got screwed on the end deal by the owners, who screwed everybody, but it was a amazing learning experience living in Bulgaria for 7 months and trying to turn this. We actually turned the factory profitable again. It was a great job, but and it was, you know, I probably learned more in that 7 months than I did in 2 years in my MBA. It was like media grad school, media implementation, like real stuff.
Yeah.
And after that experience, I ended up setting up my first LLC, my first company. And when we moved back to the US briefly as my wife got a job, and or I moved back because my wife had been living in the US while I was in Bulgaria. And I just set up an innovation consulting firm kind of thing. It was like 2009, 2010, and the economy was still really bad. In DC, the only economy was security stuff, and I had lost my top secret clearance because I'd been out of the military for just long enough, and I had, just lived in Bulgaria, so that's not very helpful for contractors. And I really didn't want to do that stuff anyway, and so I started working in emerging markets and innovation, and I won some grants, and we ended up getting an opportunity to move to Doha, Qatar. So we moved to Doha, Qatar. I set up a business there. My wife was still working for the same company over there. She was working for a think tank called Rand. And we worked there for 3 years. My daughter was born there. We had a great time, met a lot of great friends. I actually did some startups over there, so I got some of that entrepreneurial stuff out, though nothing really worked. Very difficult environment. But it was a lot of fun, and we were also glad to leave. And you really appreciate the U.S. so much more. And I think really when you work overseas, especially when people complain about regulation in the U.S., and you're just like you have no idea. You don't know how lucky we are to have the regulation that we have. Like we saw a mall burn down, and a nursery with 18 kids in it died because of bad fire regulations and things like that. Yeah, don't complain about regulations because that's the other side of it. It was but I got to travel a lot there too. I was working in Egypt. I worked in Ghana. I worked in Lebanon and Jordan and China. I was in Beijing a bunch of times. So got to do business in all these places, and that was amazing, and set up businesses here and there and help raise funds. And yeah, you really start to see the real structural problems. I think it kind of went full circle for me with thinking we saw when I was getting out of the military, I was so excited about getting into business and thinking, business was really the solution, innovation, entrepreneurship. This is what will help with development. That when I was seeing what the military was failing, in places, and the governments can't force this change. Maybe innovation and entrepreneurship is the solution. And then you try to do entrepreneurship and innovation in emerging markets, and you're actually, you kind of need a government to work to have good entrepreneurship. It's really, without good institutions, without, good courts of law and reliable, justice departments and things like this, and ports that work and things like this. It's really hard to make any type of business work. Without if you can't even have a contract with people, that you can trust. Business is based on trust, and that doesn't work without government. I think we miss that. But the hidden hand of the market in the U.S. is actually based on a strong federal government, so people take that for granted a lot here, and I think we need, we have it so good here. We actually almost crap on it, and I think we need to appreciate it more and invest in it more. But yeah, so then we moved back to the U.S. in 2013. I got a job in a charity hired me as their director of innovation to help them launch products from emerging markets that they wanted to be as social impact products. And so the first thing we did was coffee, and we did this coffee from Eastern Uganda. So it was great. I got to go to Uganda a couple times, work directly with the cooperative, purchase the coffee, work with direct trade, and develop and launch this coffee. And I, of course, because this is what happens to me, I fall in love with these projects, and I just put my head down, blinders on, and I just want to work on it. And I was launching the coffee. We got it out. We made the first after the first year developing this, we launched the coffee, made $20,000 in the first month of sales, and the charity runs out of money and they fire me. So I was after all these getting beaten up so many times between trying to start businesses in the Middle East, the Bulgaria thing, just going through the recession. I was just had it at that point, and I was that's it. I'm full in doing this. I'm starting a business, going to do my own thing. And that's when True Made Foods was born. And so a guy I knew had round kind of serendipitously, around the same time that I was getting fired for the charity, like recontacted me. I met him at a conference. He was an ex-Army guy. He had pretended to be in the food industry, and told me about this idea of putting vegetables in things. And the idea of putting a veggie in a ketchup was just like brilliant, because I thought, pasta sauce, we use carrots, not sugar. It immediately was like fireworks for me, because I was like, by that time I just had my fourth child, and ketchup was a battle in my household. Like, it was like a war that I was losing, big time, because I'm a very healthy eater, always been very anti-sugar. And I always thought ketchup was like red sugar, like it was red corn syrup, basically. It has more sugar than ice cream, ounce per ounce. It's terrible for you. 4 grams of sugar in a tablespoon. Like a baked at home chocolate chip cookie or average chocolate chip cookie has 3 grams of sugar, 2 to 3 grams of sugar.
Wow.
So, a tablespoon of ketchup has more than a chocolate chip cookie. It's like, that's what you're putting on your burger, or your kids are putting on their nuggets. And if you have small kids, you realize that, ketchup is like a food group for them too. No shock, because it's so sweet. And I think every parent has been through this battle and the struggle where you're like, you don't want your kids pouring ketchup all over their food, but you also want them to eat dinner. And so you just give in. And, and my kids are putting, if we would cook tuna steaks and they would put ketchup on it. It's just like, so disappointed as a father, but this is what happens. And you quickly become disillusioned as a parent. When you're a young parent, you think your kids are going to eat so healthy and perfect, and they're going to be great eaters, and that lasts for like a year, and then you give up. And you're throwing Cheerios at them and chicken nuggets. So this ketchup thing was like, I thought this was an immediate idea. Like, I thought it was brilliant. I thought this is something I need. I am the customer, and I think that's important. When you're starting a business, to really get excited about that. I had tried to start businesses or get into business before in areas where, like, I thought it was a really interesting area, thought it was an interesting business idea, and really realized after a few months, it was like, I'm not the founder for this. Like, you start telling your own founder story, like, and you're like, this doesn't fit. And I was like, this one fits. Like, this is something I'm totally passionate about, something we would use in the house constantly. That I would love to get my family and friends using, things like this. And I really think there's more people out there like me who would use this product. And so that got me excited about doing this ketchup. Our initial product was kind of a low sugar ketchup. It had 50% less sugar than a regular ketchup. We used carrots, butternut squash, and spinach in it to naturally sweeten it. I thought, I was worried about trying to go full no sugar for the flavor, because I knew it had to taste good. There was a couple other kind of better for you products out there for a while this time, and they tasted awful. It's not, as a parent, like, they position themselves as kind of this hipster ketchup, which was, I guess, cool at the time, but in like 2014, 2015, 2016 now. And which, I get coming from where they were coming from, but like, as a parent, it's completely unhelpful, right? If the kids don't eat it, there's no point in buying it. So my kids hated it. And so it was like, I need to have a product that the kids eat. And so one of the core tenets of the business of True Made Foods, when we started it, is that, the kids have to like this. And anything that we launch, any product we launch, we don't want to be pushing it uphill. It's hard enough to start a food business. It's hard enough to start any business. Like, if you at this point, I think I'd been like through enough ringers and done enough stupid projects and ideas, and failed enough, that I was like, I know how hard this is. I do not want to go after do something that, one, that I'm not 100% totally passionate about, and two, that I feel like is difficult in any way. Like, if it doesn't taste good, or it takes an acquired taste, or if it isn't much healthier than everything else out there, if it doesn't hit those categories where if it's just a Me Too product, it just becomes so much harder to do. And I knew what I was getting myself in for, the amount of work and pain I was going to go through, and so I did not want to do that with a subpar product. And so the taste flavor profile was key for us for, early on to get this right. And so that's kind of became the tenet, was like, this is the core of our business right here, is we're not going to launch a product if it doesn't taste the best, if it isn't the healthiest and have the best ingredient deck on the shelf, hands down. And because this is too hard, and not going to make it harder. So
what comes next? Do you form a team at this point, or do you start working on the recipes?
I had a co-founder who came in, who said he had the recipes, and I believed him at first. And it turned out he didn't. His recipes were awful. And so like a month and a half going into starting the business, like I realized like we had to start from scratch, like with the recipes and the ingredients and stuff like that. And so we did, and we got lucky that like the first go around worked, like kind of just pushed. And so we got super lucky that this kind of first go around worked, and we got to this 50% less sugar ketchup. And then once we got there, I got us into actually we had already just joined an accelerator called FoodX in New York City. And my dad lived in New York City at the time, and so I had a place to stay, which was huge. So I would spend like 3 or 4 days a week up in New York City. And my wife hated this, obviously, and but it forced me to work like round the clock on the product, on launching the business. And the nice thing about getting into the accelerator was, again, because you have your family and you're under this pressure to kind of like make money or do something with this, like the accelerator gives you some money up front, so it takes a little bit of the relief off. It gives you some validation that you actually have something here, and two, somebody's believing in you, and it gives you a network as well, which is so much more important. And that was something I really didn't have. This is the beginning of a network to really help launch a business in the U.S. I've been living overseas for so long, and then in the military before that. So the network was critical. And it also then forces you to work like nonstop on the business. Whereas if I didn't have the accelerator, there probably would always been this nagging thing in the back of my mind, should I be I'd probably be, a couple hours a day, then maybe looking for a real job. And if a real job did come along, maybe I would have taken it. But because I'd made this commitment to the accelerator and set up the business, had an initial investor with the accelerator investing in us, it forced me to go full in right away. Now, I would not recommend doing what I did. I think I went in a little bit too early. Like we went full in. Like I would have liked to have spent 6 months, a year developing a product and getting it right, and really testing the market more and things like that. I don't think I also, if I didn't do it the way I did it, I might not have started the business. So I think that was kind of the difference in the change. And we struggled for the first 2 years. It was a mess, because of that. And it was a total mess for the first 2 years. I had to kick the co-founder out. He was not doing anything, just like he didn't bring the recipes to the table. He didn't bring anything else to the table. Unfortunately, these things don't work sometimes. And he was really hurting the business. And so, that was painful. That probably set us back months, if not more, maybe a year, Again, not having the right people to start with is difficult. So, being really careful with who you start your business with is really tough.
And are you considering giving up at this point, or are you thinking this is just another failing experience?
I have a real problem where I'm too stupid to give up a lot of times. And I probably should have, like in 2016, I probably should have kicked, when I had to kick the co-founder out and everything, like I probably should have given up then, or at least restarted or did something. And I didn't, and I kept driving through. And again, part of this is like, cause I had investors at this point. We brought on these investors a little bit too early, not a lot, but like a couple angels. And I just felt way too committed. And I could not bear losing anybody's money. And I also just like, since 2008 and like having to go through looking for a job during the financial crisis where, like every door was shut in my face, I just really did not want to look for a job again either. So I had this like this driving thing of like not wanting to have to look for a job ever again. And, so yeah, it was just, everything kind of fell in place for me to just push through. And luckily enough of these angels kind of believed in me enough to keep kind of just barely keep us going. But got us going. And like 2015, 2016, 2016, we had like a kind of a huge year. Like we did 400,000 in our first year, and that was amazing. In a way that was bad because it kind of set expectations. Like I thought we were going to be, off hockey stick growth. And then like 2017 was like $350,000 in sales. And it was like, product wasn't working on shelf. The packaging was really bad, terrible packaging, terrible label designs, just did not communicate. Went into too many stores that, we shouldn't have gone into too fast, over relied on a certain amount of customers. So really took like 2017, I had to like really kind of revamp things, rethink, focused on launching a plastic squeeze bottle for the ketchup, finally hired designers. And I also worked on developing the no sugar ketchup at that point. And I found Ed Mitchell, who is our partner now in barbecue sauces, legendary pitmaster Ed Mitchell and his son Ryan. Like we worked out something where we started a partnership to where they would be the face of the barbecue sauces and kind of be the co-founders of the barbecue sauce chain line, and be involved in the rest of the business as well, but specifically drive on the barbecue piece. Because I didn't want to, I wanted to do barbecue sauces, but I wanted to do it right, and they were just the perfect fit in every single way. And so we came together. And so 2017, I kind of worked on all those things to try to get things going. And then like 2018, we had like an $800,000 year. And then 2019, we broke $1 million for the first time. And then this year we've already passed, we're past 1.6 million for the year, and we're on track. We're already at over 2 million in trailing 12 months. So, which is a huge milestone, especially for condiments. Condiments are really difficult to build early on because this is one thing I didn't realize getting into this, but if you think about it, when you're trying to hit $1 million in sales, like that's a lot of bottles of ketchup, like, because people don't buy ketchup every day. Like, and the average household only buys ketchup 3 times a year, right? It sits in your fridge. The easier, quote unquote, easier, like categories to launch in are, chips or ready to drink beverage, coffee, things like that, where people are consuming it on a regular basis, or like beef jerky and snacks, where people grab it and go. Now those categories are much more saturated with competition because they're easier to launch in. It's easier to get to $5 million in sales like that. It's much harder in a ketchup, which means I have a lot less startup competition, right? But it's harder to get to that first 2 million, first 5 million in sales. Like you need more stores, you need more customers, bigger customer base. You really have to start figuring out all the math behind that. You think about like how many times a year somebody's buying and how many customers you need to be able to hit that sale point, and so we probably need, 5 to 10 times the amount of customers that like a beef jerky brand does to hit the same sales, so then you start putting a marketing dollar cost to that.
Go ahead, Lauren. It's your turn.
I'm curious. Oh, I've just been engrossed in listening. So I work with a lot, actually, the past couple of years, I work with a lot of startup founders and CEOs and some groups too. And what you're describing of kind of that roller coaster, right, is fairly common to that startup entrepreneur, where it's like, I'm good, everything's awesome, the world is crashing down around me. But I've also equated it, I'm curious your thought on this, I've also equated it a bit to a sport analogy of like that first year almost sounded to me like, sure, there's a lot of pressure and all that, but it's, to me, at least the people that I've talked to thus far, it's kind of like that team that's trying to win the national championship for the first time. Like there's so much pressure and it's such a big goal, but there's kind of like this tinge of excitement because there's so much you have to gain. And then when you get there and you win that, then there's like this change because now you're trying either not to lose that status or to repeat. And so there's this kind of different vibe felt to the pressure or the stress. I'm curious your thoughts on that or your experience of it.
Yeah, it's Absolutely. I think that's a great analogy in a lot of ways. I mean, when you're first starting, like everything is difficult, but like you can also like everything is also amazingly new. Like every little win is incredible, right? And you'll get mentioned like when we first we launched in like 2015, like super early, and it was like we at the Fancy Food Show, we launched in the Fancy Food Show, and there was a couple of articles that mentioned us, as a new product coming out. And in 2015, there's still like so much new buzz around new food, because like 2010 through 2015 was kind of like this romance period for new food items where you could launch anything with a clean label, or like call it organic, a regular version that it would, everybody would get excited about. And so 2015, you would get these news mentions. You're like, it's amazing, we made it, this is incredible, it's going to just go explode. And then now looking back, I'm like, I wish we didn't even get mentioned in those things now, because it gives you nothing, like really at the end of the day. I mean, there's some bragging points you could start, we would put the news mentions in like sales and investment decks, but it was like, you don't get any extra sales from that because nobody can find your products. Like, we weren't in stores anywhere, and our e-commerce was there, but it kind of sucked, and our products aren't great for e-commerce anyhow. They're heavy and they cost a lot to ship. At the time, you couldn't even we were all glass bottle at the time. We launched in only glass bottles, and at the time you couldn't even be on Amazon FBA, fulfillment by Amazon, in Amazon warehouse if you're a glass bottle in 2015. It wasn't until like 2017 or 2018 when they started letting glass bottles in there. And even now they charge extra for handling on glass bottles. So it was, you think about it, you get so excited by these little things, and they're really, now looking back with a little bit of kind of maturity on it, I guess, is like you say, so inconsequential, like so unimportant. And really, I should have been working just on this and preparing. But I mean, also psychologically, you need that kind of keep going. But but that second year, there really is that kind of like sophomore slump. I always felt like that too. I mean, it's interesting. I played rugby in college, and we had a really good rugby team at Vanderbilt when I was there. And my freshman year, I was a starter, and it was like amazing, right? And it was like such a proud thing. And then like my sophomore year, just kind of slumped down because it's like there was nowhere to go, right?
I've worked with a lot of you, yep.
Yeah, you were like a star as a freshman, right? Because it was amazing that you were starting as a freshman, and then like sophomore year, it's like whatever. It's like where do you go from there? And so I mean, it kind of happened to me in high school too. It's like track and stuff, and so so I think that does happen a lot, and like you do go into this slump, and it's because it's also so easy to build revenue in your first year, right? And then it's much harder to maintain it. I think software companies have this problem too, especially with software as a service, when all of a sudden they realize their churn is higher than their engagement rate, and that doesn't hit until like 6 or 12 months in, right? Something like that. And it's the same thing with food, where if you're going mainly grocery, you're hitting, you're opening up all these new stores, and then all of a sudden, the biggest PO is the initial PO, the initial purchase order is huge. And then the next PO doesn't come for a couple months, and then it's really small. If you're lucky, it keeps growing, and then things like that. So, and a lot of times it's not as easy to keep building that ACV, the distribution, keep building those sales. There's a really strong, I think there's, especially in food, I think, I always tell new startups, just worry about growing your sales. And people told me this at the time, but I think the problem is you can't keep raising money if you're not hitting certain major milestones. And that's because there's not a lot of angel capital and not a lot of give in food. There's not excessive valuations. Valuations are really are very, very low, even for startups. And you have to, so if you're not get to that $1 million, the big money doesn't come in, and or that couple $1 million, so you're just bringing in $25,000 checks at a time kind of thing from angels, and you're struggling to get by, and build a real brand and create a real strategy, because but really you should be just focusing on trying to not burn cash and focus on just getting a few key sales and really building that customer base in like that channel or that market, that regional market. And, I was told to do this too early on, and I didn't listen because I just wanted to get, well, part of it, and this goes back to having kids, right? Like I was just like, I need to have a salary. There's only so long I can go without a salary, so I need to get this company to a point where I can either raise enough money, to justify paying myself a salary. And because of that, like I just went all out. And also there's no investors out there. There's very few investors out there like who will go, okay, let's grow slowly and reasonably and do this right. And don't worry, I'll keep backing you the whole way. Like they never say that. Like the guy who writes you the $5,000 checks wants you to be at $5 million in 5 weeks. Like they all like expect you to take their, their small dollar check and turning it into hundreds of millions of dollars. So I think that's kind of the problem too. This early stage, this area, this infancy part is a real problem where like the expectations are just totally out of whack a lot of the time. And if I think as an industry or as a ecosystem, like we just need to get those expectations in check and get it right. And you look at some of the companies who did it really well and they built up. They usually didn't have to raise money early on. They had family money or like some other source of income coming in. They have a restaurant, they launched a food product outside of it. So they were able, the restaurant can sustain them. And that helps, or a storefront. And that helps because then you can grow a lot smarter and do it right. And I think, that was something I didn't have. And I think but I think, you shouldn't have to either have like a trust fund or a rich uncle or have a restaurant to be able to do it right. Like somebody should be able to, there needs to be investors that help people grow smartly. And if you're an investor and you're an angel investor and you write somebody a $25,000 check, don't expect them to be at $5 million next year. Like, expect them to grow their sales and grow their metrics and do it right and help them find extra money to keep it going that way without getting out of control.
That's what I was going to say. I think there's a difference too, right? Between doing that, kind of being the one-hit wonder versus creating a sustainable and scalable business model, right? Right. Which a lot of, I think startups experience that challenge.
Yeah, and if you're growing at 100% a year, that's still great. I mean, if you're going from 50,000 to 100,000 to 200,000, I mean, it's going to get to that. It's still exponential growth. People are so impatient and want to see it at $10 million, within a year. And like, I mean, I got some good advice, but I also got a lot of bad advice early on about like trying to like pushing me to go faster, push me to go harder, go focus on this, don't do that kind of thing. And that encourages you to like spend money in the wrong way to try to, dump money into marketing that really isn't as effective, you don't need. So
I was working on a documentary project, and I was really, really stressed. And one of the consulting producers gave me the advice of just tell the story. And so have you had a similar experience during all of this kind of mixed advice? Where you had a moment where you're just like, I have to let it happen or just do what I know to do?
Yeah, it was just like, focus on the stores. I mean, we're primarily a grocery channel focus, and it's, we were getting caught up trying to build other channels or like, trying to get into food service too early, trying to, maybe wasting money on e-commerce, something like that, which are important. You have to be omni-channel these days, but like there's going to be one channel that really makes your money. And for our category, for ketchup, it really is, and barbecue sauce too, really is being in the grocery store. Like that's where people buy it. That's where the majority of the stuff happens. Just do that exceptionally well, like, and just focus on that really well. And the other stuff will come, like, and you'll be able to have enough money and bandwidth at some point to be able to do well on Amazon too. So once we were like dedicated to the retail channel, like we needed to do it, extremely well. And just, focus on what you can control in the store, your promotions, in-store demos, stuff like that. And once we started once we really start focusing on that and focusing on our shelf presence, like we redid our labels like 4 times in the last 2 years. And I think we've got really solid labels right now. And, you know, we've even tweaked them again for 2021, but just a small tweak. But it's, you know, I think and we got a much better designer now too. And like, I think it's, that's just so important. Like, you know, just doing that, like focusing, like the labels make 10 times more difference than anything else you can do on your food product, right?
Yeah, there's some fascinating research behind that, you know, the psychology of that, and even shelf placement and all those things.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, just trying to focus on doing that right and doing it well, you know, really kind of makes more difference than anything else. You know, and the other stuff will come. It's like, that's like telling a story, right? You know, focusing on the customer, making sure you get there. So.
What do you view as keys to your success?
Well, you know, I don't think I'm successful yet, but you know, so that's one thing. Definitely not. But I think number one is definitely like kind of the grit. I see so many people quit or give up or just, you know, don't have what it takes to make it through the hard stuff, like really, and or don't have the stoic attitude to it too. And the second is really just kind of finally developing a stoic attitude towards things, you know, where because there's going to be so many ups and downs, and like the downs will just kill you if you don't, and especially, and the roller coaster will just kill you if you don't just kind of, you know. So with the ups, I celebrate them somewhat, but I don't like get too out of control with the ups now. And like, you know, I don't get too out of control with the downs. And I kind of prep myself for this too. It's like, what happens? You know, we're in 1,300 Walmarts right now. And like, what happens if Walmart comes back and says, you know what, we're just going to carry Heinz and private label, or maybe we're just going to do private label. Maybe they just want to do that, you know, and what if they drop us, right? You know, I got to be ready for that, you know, got to be ready for that reality. I can't control it. You know, I can't control everything. You know? So that could happen. So you got to be ready for that and have a plan, kind of a semi-plan for that.
I'm curious, as a follow-up, how do you define success then?
How do I define success? It's a good question. I don't know if I've ever thought about that. It's a great question. I think it's kind of a moving target. I think that's kind of the problem is like, you know, I would have killed to be where I am right now a couple of years ago in 2017. You know, hopefully, I can say that again. You know, I don't think I'm going to be happy with where we are yet until like, you know, well, that's not true. I mean, I think, you know, I hope I keep going until we become the next Heinz, you know, because that would be the ultimate kind of success. But at the same time, if it looks like there's something that's not going to happen, or if it's, you know, just taking too much of a toll on the family or anything like that, I mean, my kids come first, then, you know, hopefully I'll redefine my area of success or rethink of it. And so right now it's all about, you know, becoming the next Heinz. But, you know, if like there's a point where this is just it's becoming too negative for any reason, or it's getting too hard, you know, on my kids, then I'll, and we've gotten success in other ways and investors get their money back, then I'll, you know, call that success. So, and, you know, make that happy. Yeah, my kids are number one. So that's the only thing that matters.
And feel free to decline to answer this particular question, but I was curious the way that you worded that. Did you feel more pressure then, or do you feel more pressure now comparatively?
I definitely felt more pressure then. I think right now we are finally this year, 2020 is really, we got to a point where it's going to be a lot harder for us to fail, right?
Awesome.
We have a great strategic partner who's providing us working capital and things like that. So we have, you know, an investment run, and we have sales data that, you know, makes it easier to raise capital when we need it, if we need it. The product is clearly working and it's getting out there. And you know, it was just, there were a couple of years where, you know, we could have failed any given month, you know, kind of thing. And like, we almost ran out of money a number of times. Like literally getting down to like, you know, $10,000 in the bank account. And like, freaking out and calling investors and like, please, like, give the love of God, like throw something in here. Or just, and there was like a year where, you're trying to figure out what bills to pay, every month. You're like, how can we push this one out another month? Will this supplier like give us another 30 days before like totally freaking out on us? Who do we have to keep happy? Okay, we got to pay the shipping company, we got to pay the freight company because otherwise we can't ship product anymore. So, and like, who else can we not pay? So there was definitely like a year or two of that. And that's a difficult part to be in. And we're not there right now. I mean, obviously we're not like throwing money at anybody. We're being like super, I feel like I'm even more, frugal now than I was earlier on, because there was like a level of desperation of just trying to gain sales early on. If my lawyer sends me a bill that I wasn't expecting, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna bitch about it, but I can still pay it. I won't put it off for 6 months and hope that he doesn't, and hope he still keeps working for me. So,
Sure. That answer reminds me, I had a dear family friend who was running a restaurant and they were still trying to get it off the ground, and they came to turn off the electricity, and he went out and asked the person if they could just let him finish cooking what was on the grill. just give me a few minutes and I'll be
That sounds about right. Yeah. There's like, I think there's, for at least for a CPG company, like there's this spiral of death where you're like around $500,000 in sales, 500,000 to $1 million, especially. And, you're doing like, good month is $80,000 and a bad month is like $40,000, $30,000. And when you're in that cycle, like you really just have not, and if you're paying salaries or contractors or anything, like you can't cover any costs at that point. And you're definitely, it's a volume business, and that's like the cycle. That's a cycle of death because you're scaled up almost like a big company to be able to maintain that level of sales and grow it. So you have kind of a lot of the expenses as a big company, but you don't have the revenue to cover it. And that's kind of like this most important area for kind of like investors to step in, things like that, because debt won't cover that area either, right? It's really difficult for debt to cover that area because you're just losing too much money. And that's the difficult point. Really, you have to break out of that cycle. I think once you're hitting like 300 or 400,000 in sales, like our calculations right now, and it's always a moving target because you always have to spend a little bit more on marketing too, or like increase your overheads a little bit if you're hiring. And that's the challenge, right? Scaling the revenue and the costs at different rates. But like right now, if we were hitting 400K in sales a month, we're over 300 for quite a few months this year, but if we were hitting 400, like that's where we would be really cash flow positive and like things would be okay. Of course, now if we need to get there, we need to spend more money on marketing, right? And we need to hire somebody else and things like that. So, we're not quite out of the cash flow suck yet, but we're getting there.
That's not nearly the scale you're on, but we launched our podcast in, was it May?
May.
And every time I think about what we need to do to keep growing, it's like costing money. And so
time and money.
Yeah. So what have you learned about yourself throughout your journey?
I've learned, what have I learned? I've learned I'm bad. You learn what you're bad at, probably more than what you're good at. I learned I was like I was too trusting and like too reliant on people, too trusting of people and too nice, giving them too much time. I think part of that comes from being in the military where like, as an officer or as a senior enlisted or anybody in a leadership position in the military, you're going to have bad people. You just get stuck with a certain amount of bad people, right? It's just always the case. And you're seen as a bad leader or it's a failure of leadership if you are just like, I need to get rid of this person. We need to kick this person out. That needs to be the absolute last resort. You have to go through absolutely every other form of mentorship and coaching and, different types of disciplinary actions or whatever it is. I think that has always kind of kept me from and when you're doing a startup, and some things aren't working out, nobody's working out, you have to like kick somebody out quick. You have to cut ties fast. And I just didn't do that early on in the first few years. And that was a huge mistake. And it cost us a lot, because you're bringing people on or you're working with somebody and they're just not pulling their weight. They're not doing what they promised. And you gotta test them and you gotta kick them out quick. And you gotta work with them slowly. And, and I wasn't used to that. I was thinking like, I gotta make this work. I gotta make this relationship work. What am I doing wrong? That they are not doing their job well enough. I was thinking like, am I not getting them enough information? Am I not getting, and that was, and so that was real problematic for me. Like I was really bad. So now I almost don't trust myself sometimes, and like with people, and we're looking at hiring right now, and I'm a little worried about that. It's got me freaked. So,
I have the same problem with giving people too much time. I think that like I want to exhaust every opportunity that I don't want to be the reason they're having problems, and sometimes I take it too far. So
yeah. And then, sometimes now, like with my sales team right now, sometimes they're like, oh, I don't know. They're really hard on me. And like, I have this outsourced sales team, and like, they always, the leaders of it are telling me that some of the people are complaining that I'm too hard on them now, and things like that. I'm like, guys, it's like, but sales is like, it's like you have one metric. Like there's one metric to be. I don't care how nice you are right now. So, and I had to like make that switch and make that change and really drive on the kind of thing. So,
what are some things that you have done or do to help manage the stress of all this?
To be honest, I think like kind of my kids help a lot in a way, because it's like it forces me to totally dissociate with companies. Sometimes like I have to be like totally into kids. Clearly I have no hobbies like whatsoever, right? There's no time for anything like that. But I don't even have time to read, right? And so like throwing myself into my kids' lives and focusing on them and being stuff like that, it forces I think it helps a lot, because it forces my brain to totally disengage and focus on something else. I mean, sometimes it like quadruples the stress, and sometimes like, when your kids aren't going to bed at night and you've got like 3 more hours of work to do, and like they're like just not going to sleep, and you're like I'm gonna be up till 2 a.m. because of you, and I'm gonna be up to 5 the next morning, so sometimes it makes things worse, but most of the time I think I've found in the long run it helps, because I can I just have this immediate release where like I can forget about things and stuff like that, and just focus on them and turn my brain off from that.
Are you able to do that? Turn your brain off?
Yeah, no, I've gotten better at that as I get older. Actually, I think it's probably because as you get older, you're too tired. I'm not smart, so I can't. It's easier to turn off.
I'm in that cycle where I wake up at 2:30 now, and like if I wake up even momentarily, all the things that I had on my to-do list somehow find their way into my consciousness. So I was like, why is this happening every morning now?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's tough. I found things like to help me get to bed. Like I have to, number one, like driving through all the emails is key, and then 2 is just writing down a quick to-do list. I'm not great with project management tools or anything like that. I don't use anything kind of complicated, but just like having a fast to-do list of like, these are the most important things in my mind that I got to do, so that I don't have to think about them at night. Like, because I know I'll wake up in the morning and I can forget everything, and I can read that and I'll be fine. I'll know what to do. And I know what I need to get done first thing in the morning. And so I think that's been a good trick when I have too much going on.
I want to circle back. You mentioned the nature versus nurture issue earlier. We actually met in grad school studying expert performance and expertise.
In Florida, we were there with you, not too far away.
And so we ask all of our guests, I don't think I just explained it for the listener. Obviously, understand what it's about, but essentially one extreme view is we're born with everything that we need. We have to cultivate nothing. The other extreme view is we're born with nothing. We have to cultivate all of it, and there's everything in between. Where would you fall on that continuum or spectrum?
I think much more nurture than nature, like on the spectrum, but obviously there are some, nature pieces to it. Like, like, I think it's pretty amazing. I think, our brains are plastic. Like, I think from an intelligence standpoint and a skill standpoint, like, nobody should ever say that they're bad at math. Like, there is like no such thing, or you're some type of learner. Like, that apparently doesn't exist either. Like, I think, you can learn almost anything. Like, anybody who says, "Oh, I'm much more of a visual learner," I'm like, everybody is. It's just much easier to watch a video than it is to read something. That's just like, but yeah, some people are more focused. I mean, seeing it with my kids, you see the differences, like, in the things, but then you also realize, like, my oldest kid is super focused, much more, can do much more deep work, things like this. Some people have much more energy and, ADHD. Some of that might be environment, some of it might be diet, some of it might be, affected by it. So I don't think we really know totally until you really change all the variables. And, you can control things. Like, there's so many successful people who have overcome, certain types of, whether you're called a disability, but like setbacks, like having ADHD or something like that, and they just figure out ways to manage it, or, play to their strengths. I mean, you always think about it from a professional athlete standpoint too. Like, if you want to make it into the NFL, like, there's a certain amount of limitation. If you are 5'4" and 140 pounds, and it's going to be extremely hard. But there's guys who play in the NFL who are 5'10" and 190 pounds. So there are physical possibilities here. Then you also say, I mean, and I think some of those physical limitations really don't come in until much later. If you look at athleticism, like, Usain Bolt and who's the swimmer?
Michael Phelps.
Michael Phelps. Like, those two guys are perfect examples. Like, they have the perfect bodies for their sports, right? Michael Phelps, short legs, long torso, better for swimming. Usain Bolt, long legs, short torso, which is best for speed. And but they still would not be gold medal winners if they didn't put the work in at the same time, and the mental capability, all that stuff too. So there's so much different things that you're going with. So I try to tell my kids is, like, at their level for sports or academics, like, there is no physical or nature or limitation to where they are. They might have run up against the limitation for something they want to do as they go to, if you're going to the Olympics and trying to win a gold medal, but or playing in professional leagues, but that's tiny, total different situation. And there's also, like, you're behind on something. Like, if you want to go be a physicist, but you didn't take physics, like, you're going to spend, like, you got to learn whatever everybody else needs to learn in like 10 years. It's like, it's not that you can't do that. It's just that you're behind. You have to spend more time than everybody else at that same level.
I've been told I'm the perfect physical specimen to become a clown. So.
Oh my God! Sure.
I'm joking.
Yeah, of course.
It wouldn't be that
you can fit a lot of you in a car. Or
I'll use that. Yeah.
There you go.
Thank you. So, is there anything that we haven't asked or talked about that you think is important to share with the listener?
I'm impressed that you want to talk to me and that you want to listen to me babble on here. So, like, I can talk about all kinds of stuff all the time. Doesn't mean it's the right thing for me to say, but may not be correct. I may not be right. But yeah, I mean, I think when you are doing all this different stuff, you are trying to think about these things, because I'm always trying to think about, like, what am I doing wrong? How come I'm not, doing better? What do I need to do to improve myself? That kind of thing. And I think if you take that attitude, and I think it's a big problem with our society today. Like, it's like we all think we're way too smart, smarter than we are. We rest on our laurels way too much. There was a point, I think that was as part of, like, coming out of the recession and being slapped in the face and really humbled, made me think, okay, I need to be the smartest I am is like right now at this moment, because I was an idiot yesterday because I didn't know X, Y, and Z, and I made myself smarter. I worked on something else. I learned something new. I experienced something new. Like I think you have to do that. And yeah, it just shocks me. I think Facebook arguments are like the key for this. Is like everybody thinks they're an expert on like things that they have no idea about, like, or they full on strong opinions about things that they have no exposure to whatsoever. And like, like why? Like you should be asking questions, not stating answers. And I think that's it. Everybody needs to start taking that point of view much more. You don't know. We're all idiots. Like we really just don't know.
I will go on the record stating that I prefer the time when I didn't know everyone that I've ever met's opinion on everything.
Yeah. Or what they were doing every second of the day.
It's the opinions. And like I heard some comedian say this. I mean, remember the time before Facebook when it took like 5 or 10 years to learn that somebody you knew was crazy?
Exactly. And our final question is, what's the biggest takeaway from your story?
I think biggest takeaway, don't assume anything can happen, and just kind of, and if you create, and don't assume things are going to be easy either. Like really you need to, if you go everything over with like kind of a clear eyes of like how hard something is going to be, like starting a business or doing something new, yeah, you're always going to have a little bit of optimism there and think it's going to, otherwise you would never start these things. But if you have like a clear kind of, I guess I've never run a marathon. I'm definitely not a distance runner, but like I can imagine people who are running a marathon don't start thinking that, this is going to be a cakewalk. Like, oh, no problem. Like, know what you're getting. Go into it with clear eyes, like know what you're getting into, and be ready for it, and I think that's going to, help you a lot more psychologically and help you get through this, and help you make the right decisions like through it too,
Nice. I couldn't help but smile. What marker was Stephanie Quell on when she realized it wasn't
19,
the ending?
mile 19. She said.
So we had another guest who ran her first marathon and she got the mileage mixed up and she thought it was ending sooner than it's like she didn't realize it was 27 miles?
26.2.
Yeah,
26.2.
26.2, and she thought it was shorter than that. So, and she didn't discover this one until she was on the actual course to run. Yeah. Well, Abe, it's been a pleasure. I appreciate you taking the time to talk to us. Your story is fascinating, and I love your product, and I hope everybody will check it out.
Same. I just hope some people can learn from my mistakes, stuff like that too. So, be good. And yes, buy True Made Foods. Everybody buy True Made Foods as much as you can. So.
The Path Distilled is hosted by Kevin Harris and Lauren Tashman, created and produced by Kevin Harris. The content is copyrighted by The Path Distilled, all rights reserved.